Fort Bragg, North Carolina. February 1979. The temperature had not risen above 31 degrees in 4 days, and the ground was the color of iron. Inside the main gymnasium of the Special Operations Training Complex, 240 men sat in tiered rows along 3 walls. They were not an ordinary audience. They were Special Forces operators, combat veterans, and senior non-commissioned officers who had between them accumulated more than 3,000 years of combined military service. They did not applaud easily. They did not stand for much. At the front of the room, behind a folding table covered with a green wool blanket, sat Brigadier General Raymond Harker. He was 53 years old, 6 feet even, 210 pounds of sustained physical discipline. He had served in Korea and 2 tours in Vietnam. He had trained under the original architects of American hand-to-hand combat doctrine and had written 2 classified field manuals on close quarters engagement that were still being used in active instruction. He was not a man who said things he did not mean. And he had not said an uncertain thing in roughly 11 years. In 4 minutes and 38 seconds he was going to say something he would spend the next 3 decades trying to take back. Nobody in that gymnasium knew they were about to watch the longest 4 minutes and 38 seconds of Raymond Harker's professional life. Nobody except one man, who was sitting in the 4th row from the back, wearing a gray thermal undershirt and a pair of canvas trousers that had been washed too many times. He had a cup of coffee balanced on his right knee. He had not introduced himself to anyone. That was the morning Chuck Norris changed the definition of what was possible inside the United States military. Raymond Harker had arrived at Fort Bragg with a specific reputation and a specific mandate. His reputation was that of a man who believed that military hand-to-hand combat had a ceiling, and that ceiling had already been reached. His mandate was to evaluate a proposed new training curriculum and determine whether it warranted full integration into Special Operations doctrine. He had read the proposal 3 times. He had rejected it twice by memo. He had been asked to come and see it demonstrated in person because 2 generals above him believed the curriculum might be something the American military had never had access to before. Harker had agreed to attend as a courtesy. He had not agreed to change his mind. He was 53 years old. He had seen every system. He had trained under men who had trained under men who helped build the post-war American fighting philosophy from the ground up. There was not, in his studied view, a meaningful innovation left to discover in unarmed combat applicable to military application. The body had only so many joints. The joints bent only in certain directions. What could be thrown had been thrown. What could be stopped had been stopped. The rest was decoration. He was wrong. He did not know he was wrong yet. That would come later. The gymnasium had been prepared with 2 things: a demonstration floor of laminate over poured concrete, 40 feet by 40 feet, and a film camera on a tripod in the northwest corner. The camera operator, a young corporal named Willis, had loaded a fresh reel 30 minutes earlier. He would tell people about what he filmed that morning for the rest of his life. The curriculum's lead instructor was a retired master sergeant named Delberto Fuentes, who had studied under 3 separate martial disciplines before spending 7 years training with people whose names are not in any public record. He was 41. He had the kind of stillness about him that tends to develop only in men who have been in situations from which stillness was the only available exit. He stood at the far edge of the demonstration floor and did not move when Harker's delegation entered the room. He waited. The 240 men in the rows settled into a specific quiet. It was not the quiet of boredom. It was the quiet of collective assessment. Every man in that room knew how to evaluate a fighter. Every man in that room was performing that evaluation the moment Fuentes walked onto the floor. 3 of Harker's senior NCOs demonstrated the curriculum's basic principles for the first 20 minutes. They were precise. They were technically correct. They were, by any fair external measurement, impressive. A former Olympic wrestling alternate in the 3rd row leaned toward the man beside him and said something under his breath. The man beside him nodded once. Then came the advanced sequence. Fuentes called for a volunteer from Harker's group. Not a demonstration partner. A genuine resistant opponent. A staff sergeant named Colton stepped onto the floor. He was 29. 6'3", 235 pounds with a judo black belt and a standing record in his unit's combatives program that no one had seriously threatened in 4 years. He had not been briefed on what to expect, he had not been told to cooperate, he had been told only to treat the exercise as real. What Colton did to the first 3 minutes of that demonstration was technically elegant, he was genuinely dangerous. He closed distance with sophistication and committed to each attempt with the full weight of a man who understood consequence. He was not a prop. He was not performing resistance. He meant every movement he made. He did not land any of them. And it was watching Colton fail 3 times, in escalating complexity, without apparent effort from Fuentes, that caused Raymond Harker to say the thing he would spend the next 3 decades trying to retract. He stood up from behind the folding table. He walked to the edge of the demonstration floor. He was carrying a yellow legal pad in his left hand, and he set it down on the floor deliberately. The way a man sets something down when he wants his hands free to make a point. He said that the system was impressive against an uninitiated opponent. He said that what had been demonstrated was technique, not doctrine. He said that doctrine had to function against a man who knew the system as well as the man using it. He said that in his professional assessment, there were perhaps 4 or 5 men on Earth who could implement what was being proposed against a credibly trained opposing force. Then he said the thing. He said that what was being proposed was not a revolution. He said it was an elaboration. He said that what the curriculum's architects apparently believed was possible in a real engagement under real pressure was not, in his view, possible at the level they were claiming. And that no man he had ever met or heard of could demonstrate the full spectrum of what the proposal described against a genuinely prepared and resistant opponent, without the kind of time and space that real combat does not provide. He said it was a very good system for a controlled environment. He said it was not a system for the world as it existed. He picked his legal pad back up. He turned away from the floor. The man in the gray thermal shirt in the 4th row from the back set his coffee cup on the empty seat beside him. He stood up.
If you want to know what happened in the next 4 minutes and 38 seconds inside that gymnasium at Fort Bragg, make sure you are subscribed and tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching this from tonight. He did not raise his voice. He did not introduce himself by name.
He said in a volume that required the rows nearest him to lean slightly forward that he would like to try the system if Fuentes was willing, and that if the general had a few minutes he was welcome to watch. There were 6 people in the room who knew who he was. One of them was the camera operator Willis, who would later say he very nearly stopped filming because he assumed he was about to document something embarrassing. 2 of them were in Harker's delegation, 3 were in the tiered rows. The recognition did not spread immediately. It came in stages, the way cold comes into a room when a door is opened on a winter morning. One man in the 7th row said something to the man beside him. The man beside him turned and looked toward the 4th row. He looked for 4 seconds. He said something to the man on his other side. That man looked. The current moved outward from there, row by row, spreading in both directions until it reached the edges of the room. 240 combat veterans, none of them easily impressed, settled into a quality of attention that was different from anything the gymnasium had held that morning. General Harker had not yet turned back around. Chuck Norris walked to the edge of the floor. He removed his thermal shirt and folded it once along the center and set it on the seat he had vacated. He looked at Fuentes. Fuentes looked at him. Some kind of agreement was reached without language. He had already demonstrated what Harker said was impossible. Harker just did not know it yet. A fight is not a collision. That is the first error most men make when they think about violence. They imagine 2 forces meeting and they assign the outcome to whichever force is larger. What actually occurs, when 2 trained men enter the same space with genuine intent, is a negotiation. The negotiation is conducted entirely in distance. Every decision either man makes is a statement about where he believes he is safe and where he believes the other man is not. The man who controls that conversation controls the outcome. Everything else is elaboration. What Chuck Norris understood about distance by February of 1979 was not theoretical. He had spent 18 years compressing, in a very specific way, the gap between what he could see and what he could reach. The curriculum being proposed that morning at Fort Bragg was built on principles he had not merely studied, but had participated in developing through years of practical engagement against opponents who were not cooperative. He did not say this. He did not say anything about it. He walked to the center of the floor and he waited. Colton had been watching from the side. He had returned to the volunteer position when asked. He was breathing at a controlled rate. He had been humbled once in the last 30 minutes, and he had processed that information and he was prepared to work with it. He was a professional. He came forward. The first second Norris did not move. Colton closed to 4 feet and threw a committed lead-hand combination that a competent observer would have assessed as technically sound. It did not arrive. The first component of the combination found nothing. The second component found nothing. The third component, the one Colton had committed to most heavily because the first two had set it up, arrived in empty space and carried him slightly forward. The film later showed that Norris had not retreated. He had shifted his weight to 1 foot and rotated 18 degrees. The total movement involved, measured by a trainer who studied the footage 5 years afterward, was approximately 14 inches. Colton's combination had traveled past him the way water moves around a stone that has been in a riverbed for long enough. Willis, the camera operator, had stopped breathing. The second and third seconds Colton reset. He was not panicked. He was recalibrating. He came again, this time with a different approach, lower and driving for contact at the body. He had changed the geometry of his attack. The geometry of his attack was met with a geometry he had not planned for. Norris stepped inside the distance that Colton had calculated was safe by approximately half a foot, which made the entire attack structurally irrelevant. The step was not fast in the way that most people use that word. It was early. There is a difference. Fast happens after the fact. Early happens before it. Norris had moved before Colton's commitment was irreversible, which meant he had read the commitment before Colton had fully made it. In the second row, a retired Army Ranger with 11 years of combatives experience put both hands flat on his knees and did not move them. In the fifth row, the former Olympic wrestling alternate, who had leaned toward his neighbor 20 minutes earlier, said nothing at all. He had stopped forming opinions and started watching. Harker had turned around. The fourth and fifth seconds, Colton tried a third time with the full weight of his technical training behind him. He was not reckless. He was not wild. He produced the best technique available to him in that moment from that position, which was a technique that would have ended the conversation against any of the 314 men he had used it on in the preceding 4 years. Norris received it. Received is the correct word. He did not block it. He did not parry it. He did not meet it with force. He accepted its direction and added a small amount of additional direction to it, and Colton's own committed movement became the mechanism by which his balance dissolved. He was a large man going to the floor with his own momentum, which is a very specific kind of going to the floor. It leaves a man with no one to be angry at. The floor came up. He met it. The gymnasium was silent in a way that 240 men breathing produces, which is not the same as quiet. The 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th seconds, what happened next, has been described in several different ways by the people who witnessed it. The camera recorded it. Willis, watching through the viewfinder, would later say that he understood for the first time in that moment what it meant to watch someone be genuinely present in a physical space. Not aggressive, not performative. Present. Norris moved through 3 positions in 4 seconds. Each position was technically a finishing option. Each position was executed with complete mechanical correctness and absolute control of the available outcome. Each one was not completed. He stopped each movement approximately 1 inch from the geometry that would have made it final. The pulled strike, held for 2 seconds at maximum proximity, is the most demanding technical demonstration in any martial discipline. It requires more control than the strike itself. It requires that a man be more precise in not finishing than in finishing. He held each of the 3 positions long enough to be seen. Then he stepped back. Colton was on the floor looking up. Norris stood above him. He extended his right hand. He was not breathing hard. His face had not changed. He said something. He said it at a volume that only Colton and the 3 men nearest to them could hear. Colton would not repeat it publicly for 9 years. When he finally described it, in an interview that was not widely distributed, he said it was not what he expected. He said it was the most direct and economical thing anyone had ever said to him in a professional context. He said it had nothing to do with the demonstration and everything to do with what came next. Colton took the hand. He came to his feet. He stood for a moment looking at the man in front of him. The room waited. Here is where the road divided. Every man who has been genuinely humbled in front of witnesses arrives at this moment. The moment lasts perhaps 4 seconds, and a man's character is entirely visible in how he uses them. He can accept what happened as accurate information about reality and respond accordingly. Or he can begin, quietly and immediately, the process of building a structure of explanation around what just occurred that will, if he tends it carefully, eventually make the truth unrecognizable. Both roads are available. Both are taken by various men every day. Colton looked at Norris. He said 2 sentences. The men close enough to hear him did not speak for a moment afterward. Then, in the second row, someone began to applaud. It was a specific kind of applause. It was the applause of men who understood exactly what they had watched and were choosing to confirm it. General Harker had not moved since he turned back around. He was standing at the edge of the demonstration floor with his yellow legal pad at his side. The pad was hanging from his left hand at an angle that suggested he had forgotten he was holding it. His aide, standing 1 step to his right, was looking at Harker and not at the floor. Harker walked onto the floor. He walked to the place where Norris was standing. He stood there for a moment and said nothing. This was noted by several witnesses as significant, because Harker was not a man who spent time in silence he had not chosen. He said 3 sentences. The first sentence was a retraction. The second sentence was a question. The third sentence, which Norris answered in 7 words, was the sentence that caused Harker to request a full briefing the following morning and to send a revised memo to his superiors 48 hours later that effectively reversed his previous 2 objections and opened the door to a curriculum integration process that would take 18 months to complete and would, by the estimates of the people who tracked these things, alter the foundational combatives training of every Special Forces unit the United States Army ran for the following decade. As Norris moved toward the door, a sergeant major who had been sitting in the 3rd row reached out and put one hand briefly on his shoulder, not to stop him, not to say anything. Witnesses described it later as the kind of contact a man makes when he needs to confirm that something was real, and not a feature of the light in the cold morning, and the particular way that extraordinary things sometimes feel unreal at the time of their occurrence. Norris picked up his thermal shirt from the chair in the 4th row. He folded it once, and carried it out. He did not take his coffee cup. The cup was still on the empty seat when the gymnasium began to empty 20 minutes later. Willis rewound the film. He watched 17 seconds of it through the viewfinder before he stopped. He removed the reel and held it in both hands for a moment before he put it in its case. The story left Fort Bragg inside the men who had watched it. It traveled the way these stories travel, in the break rooms and gyms and deployment cycles of a closed professional community, gathering small additions and shedding minor details, branching into versions that disagreed on the color of the room and the number of attempts and the exact words spoken. What every version retained, without variation, across all the years and all the men who passed it forward, was the central fact. The general had said it was impossible. He had said so in a specific room in front of specific witnesses, and then a man in a gray thermal shirt and canvas trousers had demonstrated, for 4 minutes and 38 seconds, that impossible was a word best used cautiously by men who have not yet seen everything. The curriculum was integrated. The training changed. Men who trained under that system were deployed in situations that their predecessors were not equipped to handle and handled them. The chain of consequence that runs from that gymnasium in February of 1979 is long, and most of it is in files that are not publicly accessible. Harker retired in 1984. He gave one extended interview on the record in 1992, in which he was asked about the Fort Bragg evaluation. He said that the most useful professional experience of his life had been the experience of being comprehensively wrong in front of 240 people. He said that a man who cannot update his position when reality revises it is not an asset to any organization. He said this without apparent discomfort, which is itself a form of integrity that most men do not manage. Colton went on to become one of the senior instructors in the integrated curriculum. He spent 11 years teaching the system he had failed to penetrate on that cold floor. He was known among his students for one piece of instruction that he returned to every training cycle. He told them that the most dangerous opponent they would ever face was a man who had nothing to prove. That a man with nothing to prove had already decided what mattered and what did not, and that this decision made him very difficult to manipulate and nearly impossible to read. He said he had learned this from a demonstration he had participated in. He did not, in that professional context, say who had given him the demonstration. The camera footage still exists in a classified record. Willis left the Army in 1983 and became a civilian contractor. He kept a copy of the reel, legally, and showed it twice over the course of his life to people he trusted. He said both times that the footage was less impressive than being there. He said this without sadness. He said it as a simple statement about the difference between a record of something and the thing itself. What the gymnasium held that morning, and what no record can fully contain, is this: a man arrived without announcement in a room full of people who believed something was settled, and he demonstrated that it was not settled. And he did this without argument, and without volume, and without the kind of performance that requires an audience to validate it. He did it because it was true. He left when it was done. The world continued. The road outside Fort Bragg carried its traffic. The temperature did not rise above 31 degrees. The light came through the high gymnasium windows at the angle of a February morning and fell flat on the laminate floor and remained indifferent to everything that had happened there and to everything that would follow from it. What a man believes is impossible defines the boundaries of what he will attempt. It does not define the boundaries of what exists. Next week we will take you to a soundstage in Burbank in 1983, where a director who had never been afraid of anything in his professional life made the error of believing that a specific stunt was not survivable, and where Chuck Norris did it on the first take. Subscribe now if you want to be there for it.